Kaleidoscope, an instrument containing mirrors and pieces of colored glass, when rotated constantly, causes a change in sequence of elements. A podcast that resembles light, a space to have contemplative and reflective dialogue, so we can become the high-quality men and women we were designed to be, and discover how to begin a journey of becoming all that you are designed to be. You are the kaleidoscope, and we will bring the narrative.
Hello everyone. Welcome to Kaleidoscope Narrative. I am your host, Miss J. I'm never alone in studio. To my right. Is this my right? Is this my yes? To my right.
You're right. I'm on your right.
To my right, we have the wonderful Mr. T. How are you doing, Tanesh?
I think I'm a little bit bamboozled.
Yes.
Yeah, but I'm alright. I'm good.
We're going to explain why. You're good.
Yeah,
You're
definitely.
Good,
yeah.
On my left, we have talented Mr. J. How are you doing today, Jono?
Well, yourself, Jen.
I'm very good, thank you. Behind the camera, we have the wonderful Mr. Tumi. How are you doing today, Tumi?
I'm good, Dennis.
He said something.
Whoa.
Finally, he said something. Wow. The reason why you feel bamboozled, a little shaken, is because we had a prepared topic today, right?
Yeah.
That we were going to discuss, but we had some behind-the-scene discussions today, and we started discussing an important conversation, an important topic that led to a lengthy 20 minute or so conversation.
One part of it.
One part of the 20 minutes.
20 minutes.
That had us really touching on a lot of experiences in our past, how we view things now, and the influences it's had in our lives. And that's the topic of sex. And as it pertains to, is it important for parents to talk to their children about sex? How does that conversation shape the children going forth with regards to sex? We hear about fathers talking to their daughters about sex. In the Christian persuasion or circles, we even have the purity ring ceremonies where promise rings, purity promise rings.
Yeah.
Where girls take the commitment, make a commitment that they're going to save themselves for marriage. And that's not always the case though, because sometimes, that things happen. You're with a guy and hey, boom. But we'll get there later. And then we talked about, we never really hear much about mothers talking to their sons about sex. And I think it's very important because then it does play a role in how boys treat their girlfriends, have conversations about sex, understand when a girl says she's not ready for certain things, how to handle that. Whereas when fathers, we're not saying all fathers, just as a disclaimer, but fathers and uncles and other elderly men in the community, when they talk to boys about sex, it's almost a conquest issue. You need to get a notch on your belt, as many notches as you can before you finally settle down for the one. So, let me see how we're going to start this conversation. Did your fathers have, because I'm surrounded by men here, ladies and gentlemen, so we'll get it from each of their experiences. Yeah, I'm not going to have this conversation alone. So, did your fathers talk to you gentlemen about sex? And if they did, how early on did they discuss sex with you? And what was the topic about? Never mind just sex. Where did the topic go? Was it you need to get out there, conquer the prey? Or was it you need to wait until you're ready, understand where the woman is coming from, or just sow your wild oats? We'll start with you, T.
Okay. I guess I'm a little bit more on the subtle one.
Okay,
because I'm more like, I really never had that opportunity to have that kind of a conversation with my dad.
Sure.
My relationship with my dad was okay. Let me put it that way. It was okay until I started realizing that no, man, it was not great. All right. at a certain age, I started to realize that I never really had that father-son relationship with my father, where I could actually express myself and talk about certain things that that I am as my nature, you know, and comparing it to him, the one who, let me not say donated, but who extended his genes to me, you know, and actually look at and understand it from that perspective to say this is where I might have gotten this or that. But I do remember having some conversations with my dad, and the most important only conversation that I remember to be so important was him talking to me about career. You know, what is it that you want to do versus what it is that you can do. You know, but when it comes to sex, dating, women, the future, how many kids you want to have, do you see yourself married, etc. I never had that kind of a conversation with my dad.
Oh, wow.
However, I did have what I call secondary fathers.
Okay.
Secondary fathers is what I look at as father figures.
Yes.
You know, and I had friends.
Yeah.
And my friends had fathers whom I actually emulated. They had fathers that, and at some point I actually envied some of my friends because they had a relationship with their dads where they could talk about everything and anything. They would talk about the girl they're dating. They would, you know, make jokes about certain things and how not to mess up at a date, etc. You know, I wanted that, but I never had that. However, that did not deter me from learning how to from how not to.
I hear you.
All right.
I hear you.
So I never really did have that kind of a conversation, but I think I turned out better off than the ones that actually had
the conversation.
that conversation.
That was your experience.
That was my experience. Because I think my father, the way my father had that conversation with me was through him sending me to a school that had great gentleman grooming.
Okay.
Where I actually learned how to treat a woman, how to respect a woman's space, how to talk to a woman, etc.
So it was sort of like an indirect conversation.
I would say that, but I don't know if my dad would have had that kind of a conversation with me the way I had it when I went to a school which actually taught me how to respect.
And why do you think that is? Is it because of the culture? Was it because of him personally? Why do you think he never had that conversation with you? I
think it was more to do with him as a person, his personality, his natural self. Because we grew up breaking the mold of our own culture. You know, we were not that deeply cultured. Tradition wasn't really
I can relate.
You know,
I can relate.
My parents they exposed us to different races, different business opportunities. I remember when I was still very young, we moved out of a particular suburb to get to a different suburb, which at the time was not as the perceived.
I understand.
The kind of a society that black people were
not perceived
most
to be.
Black people
I understand.
were. Yes. So we learned how to form our own culture in a way. We created our own culture.
I can relate.
But because of his own personality, his own upbringing, I never had that conversation with my dad.
Dumi, how about you and your dad? Did you guys formally have the sex conversation when you became of age?
No, we never had any sex conversation.
There was no sex conversation at all? So how did it work out with you regarding to discovering yourself sexually as a person?
I learned everything in the streets.
Wow.
Through friends making mistakes, through friends making all the right choices. I had to learn on my own.
Street wisdom.
Street wisdom.
Street wisdom. But I often felt like, I wish I had that relationship with my dad where we can really have father to son
Yeah.
talks, especially about sex and women.
Yeah.
Because then I would understand women better.
Yeah.
I'd know how to treat a woman.
Yeah.
Even with my own mom, like I never had that relationship with
About
her.
how to relate to girls.
Yeah, I just never had a relationship with my own mom
Yeah.
to start off with.
Wow.
So I never had knowledge of how to treat a woman.
Yo. So for you, it was trial and error.
Yeah.
Trial and error.
Yeah.
Wow. So that's the thing. Sometimes you come into relationships with you enter a relationship with somebody and you don't even understand that it's a trial and error situation for them. And so you leave a trail of broken hearts, not because you were a jerk, not because you were, this is not a platform to use derogatory language, but because really you didn't have the foundation you needed so that you could make better choices.
Yeah.
To treat them better. Jonah, how was the sex talk with your dad? Was there sex talk with your dad? Do you wish there would have been a sex talk with your dad?
Nothing that I can remember. But I did at, I think it was about 12 or 13.
12 or 13.
My mother pulled out a LP
Yes.
and said, we're going to sit and we're going to listen to this.
Okay.
So from time to time, I got the sex talk via long player.
Wow. So you had a formal education from an LP
Yeah.
that taught you what you needed to know about sex.
Yeah.
So there wasn't a person-to-person conversation.
No.
There was more a formal education about the sexual experience.
Yeah. I mean, as I developed sexually,
Yes.
coming into puberty,
Yes.
my mother noticed changes and said, I think we need to have this talk.
Sure.
And I was like, goeie genade.
Goeie genade.
I was like, what the hell is going on? Anyway, had the conversation and actually so my father never took that. He was aware of it.
Yeah.
It wasn't that it was kind of my mother trying to, it was just it was something my mother did in an afternoon when no one was around. We sat and listened to this LP.
Wow. Sure. What an interesting, very diverse, interesting experiences. Well, for me, my formal sexual conversation was with my dad, and I'm very glad it was. My dad just one day sit me down. No, we were driving in the car, actually. It was the two of us. I don't know where we were going or coming from. And my dad said, you're at an age where you are developing and you're becoming a woman. And boys will show an interest in you. But let me tell you something. For the most part, it's not that boys will be wanting to get to know you. It's just that both boys and yourself are developing at a point where your hormones and your sexual attraction is at the forefront of your development, your process of becoming men and women. But I want you to know something. You should never allow anybody to convince you to do something you're not ready for. Your sexual feelings will come, but let them be expressed at a time where you feel you're ready for them to be expressed. So don't allow any young man to say to you, in order to prove that you love them, in order to prove that you're committed to a relationship, you need to have sex. You don't. You have sex when you're ready to. And then when we got home, my dad, drew a formal drawing about what happens during sex. It was literally a biology textbook drawing, about this is a penis, this is a vagina. It got very technical. It was awkward at the time, but I'm very glad that I had that conversation with my dad because it enabled me to say no when I wasn't ready to have sex and not to be pressurized in situations that I didn't feel that I needed to be in. And it meant a lot coming from a father. Not that my mom didn't have that the sex conversation or the period conversation or the ovulation a conversation, because the body, there's discharge, there's all sorts of things if we're going to get into biology terms. But my mom did have those conversations with us, because who else are you going to go to for pads when certain things happen? But it meant a lot having the sex talk with my dad, because it made me feel like I had a voice to say certain things, especially to men, the advice coming from a man. Does that make sense?
Yeah. I have two questions for you, Dave.
Yeah.
First of all is, at what age were you when you had your first conversation with your dad about that?
It was around 9, 10. And then it happened in periods. And then we had another one when I was about 13. Then we had another one when I was 16. So it happened in periodical forms, should I say that? Yeah. Because who you are at 12 is not necessarily who you are at 16. It's not necessarily who you are at 20, I even had, there was an instance where my dad, I guess, was trying to find out why I'm not dating. And I said to him, because I'm just not. And it will happen when it happens. But right now, I really, to be honest, I really don't feel like I want to be dating anyone. And I said to him, and by the way, just because you're thinking what you think, it doesn't mean that I'm also having sex just, because I'm not having, or I'm having sex because I'm not dating, something like that. And I said to him, no, I'm not having sex either. I'm okay. I'm okay. And he looked at me and was like, okay, good to know. It's, so even now we still talk about sex. It's not an awkward thing, because he made it comfortable then. So it's a normal thing to talk about. And I think it's important for sex to be a normal conversation amongst your children. I really think it's important.
Yeah.
I've been in instances where I've had conversations with girls who don't feel like they have a voice to say, I'm not ready in a relationship. A girl is dating a guy, and there comes a point where he's ready to have sex and she's not. But she feels like, if I don't, he might just leave. If I don't, things are going to become awkward. Whereas, and I think because I had the conversation with my father, it's given me the guts or the boldness to say, I'm not ready, and so I'm not doing that.
So for you, why was it that significant? The conversation, why was the conversation more significant by your dad more than it was with your mom? Obviously, you had the conversation with your mom.
A lot of times, even now.
But why did it mean so much from your dad?
I didn't realize it when I was younger. It was just one of those awkward things. But when you start interacting with men, I don't know, because it came from a man, because I interact with men. I'm attracted to men, and those are the people I deal with regards to when this topic comes up in the pursuit of a relationship or in a dating situation. Because I got the at a girl or the encouragement from a man, it just gives me the boldness to be able to say, because my father, who is a man, has given me permission to speak up, or has given me permission to express myself, it just means it just weighs more. I don't know if that makes sense, because I'm dealing with men and it came from a man. I think that's why.
So I guess this is what Jordan was talking about earlier on, that nurture versus
nature.
Nurture.
Yeah.
Because, do you think you made particular decisions? Was it your own nature, naturally, your own will, your own mind, your own thinking, or was it based upon the nurturing of your father towards you within that aspect? You had to get that kudos, girl.
Yeah.
You had to get that, oh yeah, I listened to my dad, or that's what my dad was talking about.
Yeah.
I didn't just give in because he was pursuing me, or I wanted to please him.
Yeah.
Was it decisions that you then made based upon your own nature, or was it because of the nurturing that you were receiving?
I'm going to say a large part because of the nurturing that I received. I'll tell you why. As somebody who hangs out, I don't hang out as with a lot of women like I used to, but I mean, my female group is condensed now. It's very steady. But before, when it was more, more broad, I found that most girls had a difficult time expressing what they want. And for them, sex would be something that just happened. Most times they weren't ready for it to happen. But the man steered the direction of the relationship and the sexual interaction. And so they felt that, and I think it's also a cultural thing as well, where most of the time in Black cultures, there's just an unspoken or spoken in some instances where, men get to have their way. You just as a woman get to just follow and just go with the flow. You see? Whereas and that's why I said I could relate with you, because as much as my father and my mother taught us about our culture, about our Tswana heritage and all of that, we were raised very liberally. So from a very young age, my dad would be honest about how we need to express ourselves. We need to have a voice. Even my mom, And then I was also encouraged to go and express myself artistically. So, drawing and art club and drama club and ballet. And so we weren't really molded by what was going on in the time, especially in South Africa. Whereas certain things were allowed mainly for Black people and certain things for white people. My parents allowed us to dream. And my parents they exposed us to a lot. And even musically, and I keep saying to people, I was listening to Bruce Springsteen at a very young age, whereas in most kids who were living where I was living, that was not their reality. I was listening to Pink Floyd at a very young age, because my dad exposed us to different genres of music, different, experiences outside what we were told. This is where you need to stay, and this is your mold, and that's how you will see things. So we were also just raised quite liberally, and we're allowed to express ourselves.
You mentioned something quite interesting about culture.
Yes.
But I guess let me ask my question after the break.
All right, we'll be back after the break, and we will continue this conversation about sex, nurture versus nature. Thank you so much for joining us on YouTube. If you want to conclude the rest of the conversation, do join us on the following platforms. We are on Google Podcast, Anchor FM. We are on, Breaker. We are on iTunes and Spotify. And there's another one.
Twitter.
We're on Twitter, Periscope, and... the one we're talking about.
The long one.
Instagram. Yeah, so check us out there and you can enjoy the rest of the podcast. Ciao, everybody.